That is one big-ass rock, Dickerson said over the private comms to Carbonaro.
No shit,
She said. He saw her head pop up to look directly at him.
how would you like to fight on that thing?
No thanks, he said. If I want to freeze my balls off, I'll dangle them out of an airlock. She giggled.
That would be a shame. I like to use those every now and then.
Dickerson sighed. What do you think of the corporal? There was silence for a moment. He wasn't sure if he tweaked her with the mention of another woman or not. They were just fuck buddies after all, not in love. At least that's what he thought. When she finally spoke, there was a smile in her voice.
Not my type, Dickerson. I prefer women with bigger tits.
He giggled uncomfortably. Right. He cleared his throat. That's not actually what I meant.
Oh, what did you mean?
Her being in charge of us. Carbonaro hissed into the mic, making him cringe.
She's better. Stick up her ass on Neptune and she still might get us all killed.
He could almost feel Carbonaro shrug.
I guess she's okay.
Yeah, Dickerson said. She may not have been in any firefights, but she does have 2 commendations for search and rescue duties.
Really?
Carbonaro asked.
From where?
Trident Station, he said. Sent a vid to a buddy of mine the other day wondering if he remembered her. Said she was a bit cold but did her job well. Pulled a couple of civvies from a fire and saved a couple of miners.
Not bad.
Carbonaro said.
Guess maybe she won't get us killed.
He smiled. Let's hope not.
You going to ask her out on a date when this is over?
She said with a blatant, teasing voice. It didn't matter that no one could see his face. It didn't matter that he was hanging on the side of a piece of metal hundreds of clicks above Pluto. He blushed regardless of where he was and who could see him. Nut
up, Dickerson,
Carbonaro said.
When we get back to Neptune, you should take her for a drink.
You think?
Might as well. You have to be bored with me by now.
Carb, why are you giving me shit? Carbonaro laughed. Her helmet jiggled slightly.
I'm surprised I can't see your blush through your helmet.
She started laughing again.
Dickerson, went, status.
Calimura's voice broke in. Ah, Dickerson said. He looked over at the panel. All the lights were still green. No problems here, Corporal.
None here either, boss,
Wentz said, holding a thumbs up.
Good.
Calimura said.
We should be finished in another 5 minutes. Once we confirm, I'll want you two to disconnect one line at a time.
Aye, Corporal, Dickerson said.
Acknowledged,
Wentz said. While they waited, he and Went told jokes to one another over the private comms. Dickerson kept finding his eyes drawn to the side of Pluto below. He was viewing what few humans had ever seen with their own eyes. He asked his block for a star map, and it overlaid his vision. As his focus wandered over the endless space, a label would pop up over a particular dot or slightly lit shape. The outer Kuiper belt was filled with objects humankind had classified, but never interacted with, much less landed on. S&R Black would soon be out there among the strange debris that orbited a faraway star. They were actually going to tow one of those things back to Neptune like some kind of trophy. Well, he thought, could be worse. We could be trying to stuff it into the cargo bay.
Okay, team,
Calimura said.
Black says she's full. Line teams, get ready to disconnect. Wheel teams, get ready to reel in your partners.
Dickerson and the other Marines acknowledged. He kept the public channel open. Went, I'll go first.
Acknowledged,
Wentz said. With one foot and one glove magnetized firmly against the station's hull, he shut off the gas switch on his side and popped the connector on the line. A tiny puff of gas floated out of the nozzle, turning into a cloud of vapor that instantly dispersed into nothing. With the line still in his free hand, Dickerson demagnetized his gloves and boots and floated off the side of the hull. He attached the line to his suit and gave a thumbs up to Carbonaro. She began pulling him back, the slack completely disappearing from the line as it dragged him to the platform. Dickerson flipped his HUD view so it showed the station behind him.
My turn,
Wentz said through the comms. Dickerson watched as the Marine reached for the line. "Hey, Wint, make sure you magnetize your—" The line sprang free from the connector and a gout of xenon gas flushed into space. The force broke the magnetic seal formed by his glove to the hull. His helmet smashed into the observatory before Wint spun away, his body silently cartwheeling into space. "Wint!" Dickerson yelled as he tried to untether the line.
Dickerson, stay right where you are!
Mira yelled through the comms. Half a second later, he saw her mag walk incredibly fast to the other side of the platform. Once she dangled over the side, she pushed off into space. Dickerson switched his HUD to that of Black's cameras on the port side. Wint tumbled through the vacuum below the platform, his suited body flying away at 5 meters per second. Mira's dive had been timed perfectly. With her arms outstretched, she managed to close and lock them around Wint's left leg. Before she began to turn with his decreased momentum, a burst of gas from her attitude thrusters slowed the pair.
Wint,
She said over the comms.
Still with me? Still here.
His voice came in a panicked pant.
Think I have a concussion. No doubt,
The corporal said.
Elliot, grab the emergency line. Get out here and help.
He yelled into the comms. Dickerson reached the platform just as Elliot finished attaching himself to the carbon fiber cable and jumped into space. He easily maneuvered himself to the pair. Wint's tumble had slowed, but the pair still somersaulted awkwardly. There was no way Mira could slow them with the thrusters while they twirled about. When Elliot was a meter away from the pair, he gave his thrusters a minuscule push and wrapped his arms around Wint's torso.
Carbonaro, pull us in,
he yelled. Once she'd secured Dickerson, she'd already headed to the emergency line spool, ready to reel them in. As he clamped down the fuel line to keep the free end from moving, Dickerson mag-walked as fast as he could to help Carbonaro. She had the controls and was bringing them in, but the line had too much slack. Dickerson held it between his gloves, gently guiding it into the wheel. The three Marines slowly approached the platform. As soon as he was able, Dickerson pulled them upwards so they floated just above the Atmos steel and brought them in. Wint and Elliot gently landed on the steel platform. At the last second, Mira let go of Wint and used a MacLeod to hold on to the steel. Dickerson secured one foot, leaned down, took her hand, and pulled her up.
Thanks,
she said to Dickerson. Elliot had managed to untangle himself and stand up, but Wint was still in a crumpled heap on the platform.
Carbonaro, Wint, get him into the ship. Gunny, we have one casualty. Copy, Corporal. We're waiting at the airlock. Over. Aye, Gunny. Dickerson and I will finish securing the station and the lines. Corporal,
Gunny said.
The station has already cut off the master flow valve. You should only have to reel in the line. We can deal with the manual shut-off valve in the panel later.
She turned her head to Dickerson. He couldn't see her face through the shielded visor, but he had the feeling she was snarling inside the helmet.
Aye, Gunny. We'll need to schedule another walk to take care of that. Acknowledged, Corporal. Get your people inside ASAP. Aye, Gunny.
She nodded at Dickerson.
Secure your side. I'll take over Elliot's.
Ah, Dickerson said. He watched Mira mag-walk in anger to the other side of the platform and the line wheel. He was able to finish stowing the line and locking everything up so they could retract the platform. When he looked over at Mira, she already had her side ready. How the hell does she do that so fast? She stepped back from the assembly.
Black, confirm secure. Confirmed,
the AI said over the general comms.
We are ready to retract the platform as soon as you and Lance Corporal Dickerson are inside. Copy that,
she said. She pointed at the ladder.
You first, Dickerson.
He thought about protesting, but decided she'd kick his ass if he did. Aye, Corporal. He mag-walked to the ladder and climbed it, wondering where the hell she'd learned to do all that. Chapter 25. The sudden rush of gas had hit Wint in the hip, knocking his head against the hull before flinging him into space. The auto-doc confirmed the diagnosis of concussion, and Wint was confined to the infirmary with an order for rest. At least, that was until she got to him. To say her ass was raw from Gunny's expletive-laden rant was putting it mildly. As soon as she'd stowed her suit, Gunny was standing before her, foot tapping on the steel floor. He'd taken her to the cargo bay, made sure the hatch was closed and that no other Marines were in with them, and then let loose. She'd taken her share of stern talks from NCOs regarding poor performance. Who hadn't? Boot was all about fucking up, being punished to instill discipline so it didn't happen again, and to keep both non-rates and rated Marines on their toes. But this was different. Gunny accused her of putting a life in danger. Instead of countering him or interrupting him, she stood as stone-faced as possible, her eyes locked with his as he ranted and railed. She knew this was unfair. Wint was the problem. He hadn't followed the most basic fucking procedure in the world. Hell, even Dickerson had done his right, although he hadn't been very serious about it. As the vitriol washed over her, she fought the urge to smile. She'd saved Wint's life, although any of the other Marines on the platform could easily have done it. If, that was, they'd thought to actually move. Yes, she'd saved Wint's life, and when he was better, she'd decide whether or not she was going to end it. When Gunny finished his tirade, his face was red with exertion, spittle dangling at the edge of his lower lip.
Do you understand how you fucked up, Corporal?
Aye, Gunny, she said.
Good,
he bellowed. A silence fell over the cargo bay, punctuated only by the nearly inaudible drone of the grab plates. Finally, the crimson flush dissolved from Gunny's face.
That said, you did a great job, Corporal.
A wave of confusion filled her. Gunny?
You heard me.
She swore she saw a grin lurking just beneath his stoic countenance.
You kept a cool head, rallied your squad, and saved a Marine's life. It shouldn't have come to that, but it did.
Thank you, Gunny. He pointed a long, gnarled index finger at her.
Don't let it happen again, Corporal. Your Marines, no matter how gifted and skilled they may be, are fucking idiots. You make sure they're tethered next time.
Aye, Gunny.
Dismissed, Corporal.
That was an hour ago. Gunny's squad had spacewalked to the station and handled the external shutoff valves as well as putting the panels back in place. She felt embarrassed her squad hadn't been able to finish the operation. She sat in the galley with a hot cup of coffee rolling between her hands. Embarrassment isn't the word. Humiliation is, she thought. But at least she showed what she could do. Finally. She might not have ZG combat down, but ZG search and rescue maneuvers, all aces there. Her arm hurt a bit from the impact with Wint. The bio-nannies were no doubt working on the bruise, and in an hour or two, she wouldn't feel it anymore because it would be gone. Wint was going to be down for at least a day. The autodoc suggested no ZG exertions or gravity PT for 3 days. That meant she couldn't make the bastard push the floor for a few hours, at least not until he healed up. Then his ass belonged to her. Fucking tethers, she mumbled. Yup, a voice said behind her. She nearly spilled her coffee in surprise. Lance Corporal Elliott walked to the beverage machine. Fucking tethers. We all should have been wearing them. At first, she thought he was mocking her, and then she saw the sweat on his face and his exhausted expression. He put a mag mug below the dispenser, hit a few buttons, and waited while the drink steamed. Wiping a sleeve of his jumpsuit across his brow, he looked back at her with an embarrassed expression. Not your fault, Corporal. We know better. What happened to you? He grinned. Gunny has some chores for Dickerson, Carbonaro, and me. Went's lucky he has a concussion. Something burned in her stomach. If Gunny had disciplined her squad before she could... Damn it, she said. Elliot picked up the brewed drink, took a test sip, nodded, and sat down across from her. You know, we haven't really talked. Are we going to do that now, Marine? He shrugged. Up to you, Corporal. Look, I don't think we've given you a fair shake. I want to apologize for that. The anger dulled at once. He wasn't mocking her. His body language told her he was sincere, or at least acting like it. She was willing to give him the benefit of the doubt. What do you mean, Elliot? Well, he said and sipped his coffee, you have 4 Lance Corporals on your squad. 2 of whom had been in the ship repeatedly, and another 2 that had been in at least one firefight and rescue mission. We know better. Know better? He nodded. We know ZG maneuvers, we know tethers, we know mag procedures. He rolled the mug between his palms. We know this shit, Corporal. We just get stupid when we don't like our leaders. Kelly glared at him. That's unacceptable, Marine. She pointed a long index finger at him. You do your fucking job or get the hell out. That's the deal. That's the core. Aye, he said with a sad smile. It is, and we fucked up. He rapped the table with a knuckle. It won't happen again, Corporal. He stood from the table and took another draft from his mug. If I may, Corporal, I'd like to get a change of clothes and go smack Went. She said nothing, but nodded. Elliot bowed his head once and left the galley. Kelly watched him leave the room and noticed the back of his jumpsuit was covered in sweat stains. She downed the last of her coffee, cleaned the mug, and put it in the recycler. Gunny probably didn't want to see her. Gunny probably wouldn't appreciate her trying to chew his ass for disciplining her people, but that's the way it was. She had to make sure he kept his hands off her squad. That was her job. His job was to tell her what her job was. Growling and pissed off, she left the galley and headed to the cargo bay. She hugged the bulkhead as 3 Marines from Gunny's squad walked by. They had all sweated through their jumpsuits and looking like they needed water and a nap. What the hell is going on? Dickerson, Carbonaro, and Copenhaver were the last to walk from the cargo bay, the 3 of them in the same shape as the others. Dickerson grinned at her as they passed. Howdy, Corporal. Hold up, Dickerson, she said. The 3 Marines stopped in the hall. You two, she said, pointing at Carbonaro and Copenhaver. You're dismissed. Aye, Corporal. They headed through the bulkhead and disappeared. When she was sure they were gone, she looked back at Dickerson. The tall Marine stood at parade rest, hands behind his back. What's going on? She asked him. Nothing, Corporal. Just finishing up a little PT and chore duty. Given by whom? Dickerson's face changed from slight amusement to a thin line. Gunny Cartwright, Corporal. She ground her teeth. On what grounds? Well, he said, on the grounds that we are, and I quote, incompetent, lazy, and stupid, and will probably die in a fucking airlock accident, end quote. He disciplined both squads? Dickerson nodded. One fucks up, we all fuck up. He shrugged. Like boot, only worse. The grin returned. Gunny doesn't like it when we get complacent, and considering we're not in a deity damn training dome, he's right to. He brushed a bead of sweat from his cheek. Just wait until Went can do PT. She sneered. Yeah, you just wait. I'll have him pushing the floor until his arms collapse. Yup, Dickerson said. I figured as much. And when you're done with him, Gunny will more than likely take a shot too. No, he won't, Kelly said. He's my problem. He fucked up on my mission. His ass is mine. The grin on Dickerson's face turned into a real smile. Corporal, you might make a good gunny someday. She continued her glare. Dismiss, Dickerson. Ah, he said, and continued walking down the hall. Kelly waited while her heartbeat slowed. She had been so furious, adrenaline had dumped into her system, and now she was ready for a battle. If she met Gunny in this state, she might say something she'd regret. She took a deep breath and let it out in one long stream. Gunny appeared at the cargo bay entrance, his jaw set in annoyance and anger. His eyes found hers and he quickened his pace. Corporal? Gunny, she said. You? He held up a hand. She stopped talking and stood at parade rest. Corporal, you have a question for me? Aye, Gunny. You want to know why I disciplined your squad without you? Aye, Gunny. He leaned forward, his height and bulk towering over her. Because they were mine before they were yours, he growled. You have the experienced rejects, I have the greenhorns, but they all need to learn. And in case you've forgotten, I run the Allah damn Marines, including you. And Talby runs me.
If your squad fucks up, then they're your problem. But everyone is getting too soft. Too many months in the shipyards and training domes and all that fake crap. We're in space now, Corporal. A member of our company nearly died today because he wasn't paying attention, and I'm not going to have one of these morons die because of that.
He leaned back a little, but his jaw was still a stone.
Fucks up my record.
She tried not to laugh, but couldn't hide the smile.
Have I explained myself?
Aye, Gunny. I know it's your prerogative.
Goddamn right it is, he said. And next time, when I'm not so pissed off, I'll make sure you get the duty. And when Went gets out of bed,
Gunny cracked his knuckles,
I'll supervise your choice of punishment for the Marine.
Silence descended in the hallway. Sounds of mag mugs shuffling in the galley bounced and echoed off the bulkheads. Unintelligible fragments of quiet conversations leaked out as well. Aye, Gunny, she finally said.
Aye, indeed, Corporal.
He nodded at her.
Now that we're through with that shit, I want to report on your mission in 1 hour. The lieutenant wants to know what happened from your point of view, as do I.
Aye, Gunny.
Good, he said. Get to it. Dismissed.
Kelly turned smartly and headed to the galley. If she was going to write a report, she needed more coffee. A small grin touched her lips. She might pass CG combat training after all. Chapter 26. The bridge was quiet. Oakes was on break and Noble was down in engineering performing his manual diagnostic checks. Black had been her usually non-conversant self. Unless Dunn asked for her help, she more or less ignored him. With a block connection directly to the holo display, there was little reason for Dunn to talk to her, much less connect with her. The display showed the orders from Hayes side by side with the communication from the trio. He'd been engrossed in the new blueprints until they started the refuel operation. Then he'd been watching one of his Marines almost die, and a newly minted corporal, who had no combat experience, save him. Talby had already reported on the incident, and now they awaited Kalimura's personal report. He'd watched the recordings and seriously doubted she'd add any useful information. What happened, happened. It was Went's fault, not hers, but she still bore the responsibility for the incident. That's the way command worked, even for NCOs. NCOs were responsible for their people and for following orders. So are commissioned officers, he thought to himself. And that was the problem. He wasn't sure what Colonel Hayes and the Sol Federation government expected to glean from the derelict ship. Once they boarded her, siphoned off every ship's log, the AI recordings, and evidence of what had happened to her, SF Gov might decide to put together another expedition. Yeah, right, he said to himself. The idea there would ever be another Mira was laughable. SF Gov would continue sending nanoprobes, continue scouring the relatively nearby systems for large caches of resources. There was even talk of putting together AI ships to automate mining and mineral resource acquisition. Unsurprisingly, Transorbital was leading the charge in those technologies. In time, humans would only be good for wasting space and consumption. The AIs would rule everything. Which was another reason the trio's message continued to make him squirm with chills. They had given him a warning, something Hayes hadn't done. And those words, extrasolar material, kept echoing in his mind. Perhaps the AIs were merely being cautious, or maybe they'd run the simulations on what would happen to humanity if Mira's reappearance was made public. But he didn't report to them. They might run Trident Station and the Neptune shipyards for all practical purposes, but they didn't make decisions for the Corps, and that included S&R Black. At the same time, he wasn't sending Marines into the derelict without a word of caution and plenty of weapons. Considering Mira's size, it would take quite some time to explore the entire ship, the kind of time they didn't have if the newest projections were to be believed. They'd have to tow her at least 1/8 of an AU before escaping the hazardous area. That in itself led to other issues. After speaking with Black, he'd found the best areas to apply the towing harness, assuming enough remained of the ship to survive the operation. Once they reached her and performed an inspection, he'd have enough data to make that call. If she couldn't be safely towed, then the Marines would have to double time their exploration of the ship and focus on retrieving data from the bridge, as well as looking for survivors, rather than checking Mira for clues. "Excuse me, Captain?" Talby asked. "You asked for me?" Dunn spun the command chair around and faced his first officer. "Yes, James. Take a seat. Oakes won't mind." "Aye, sir," Talby said. He spun the pilot chair so it faced Dunn's. "The assault teams are readying us for flight. I assume you talked to that Nobilis guy over on Pluto Station?" Dunn smiled. "You could say that. He was somewhat despondent over how we managed to cock up the refueling. Something about how xenon is a precious resource out here. I agreed with him, apologized, and promised it wouldn't happen on the return voyage." Talby laughed. "Damn civvies. Should be happy they have any visitors at all." Dunn shrugged. "I get the idea they're quite happy out here. Bunch of astro heads looking for the next system we won't travel to." "True," the lieutenant said, "but it won't always be like that." "We'll see. Regardless, we have some thinking to do." "I'm all ears, sir." "Good. So pay attention." With the aid of one of the holo displays, he showed Talby the various routes to Mira and detailed the plan to tow before exploring her. The lieutenant was silent and then asked a slew of questions regarding the approaches, as well as the plan for the tow. When he was finished, he broke eye contact with the display and instead looked out at Pluto. Dunn imagined Talby felt the same way about the dwarf planet as he did. Dunn waited patiently as he finished his upteenth mug of coffee. Sooner or later, he'd have to visit the head and drain his bladder of untold liters of the stuff. He readjusted himself in his seat, mindful of the pressure there. If Talby took too long to make his thoughts known, Dunn would be squirming like a little kid. Finally, Talby turned back to face the captain. "I agree. We need to tow her before we perform a full exploration. But might I suggest something, sir?" "Of course, James." "Well, sir, while we inspect the superstructure to ensure she's able to survive the journey, it might make sense to send at least one squad to determine if the bridge is accessible. That way we might be able to complete at least one part of the mission before Mira gets hit by something. And if we can't tow her after all, we'll already be in good shape and can abandon her to her fate." "Or destroy her with TAC missiles." "Or that, sir," Talby said. "My point is—" "I understand your point," Dunn cut him off. "Suggestion noted, and when it comes time, we might very well do that. I'd like you to start going over the blueprints with Gunny to find the best possible path. Of course, you'll have to review that plan based on what we find upon reaching her." "Aye, sir," Talby said. Dunn checked the block's chronometer. "You can start making those plans once we're underway. I want to brief the assault teams after chow. Let Gunny know." "Will do, sir," Talby said. "Thank you, James. Dismissed." The lieutenant saluted. Dunn returned it with a smile and watched him go. Neither Noble nor Oakes had returned. Dunn stared out at Pluto again, wondering if he was the loneliest man in the solar system.